Thanks for being so constant. I appreciate that. Happy Monday, everybody. What's going on? Let's break on through to the other side. So I'm going to talk about something very deep and dark. And we're going to talk about whether we can manifest from all emotions. And I think we have to go way back, and I mean way, way, way back to even understand why people ask that question. Because we think that somehow there are certain emotions that are bad and worse than others, and that comes from a very archaic, old, accepted idea that there's an evil side to us. Yes, even Neville espouses to it. Joseph Campbell espouses to it. Loads of other religions espouse to it. And I don't. But I think to fully understand, and I mean, like, a lot of Neville's work was inspired, at least the psychological side of it, was inspired by the work of Carl Jung, right? Jung. And Carl Jung basically says that we have a shadow side. This is what I used to teach, meaning teaching all of the different strands of psychology. And hey, music. And one of the things I wanted to deep dive into is, one, why I don't believe in it, but two, also, why is it so popular? And then three, we get the idea of Satan, right? And the devil and and all this kind of stuff, and the boogeyman. And, from this idea, which is really just an embodiment, and I agree with Neville on this, is just an embodiment of our fears and limiting beliefs and childhood, misinterpretations and ideas and memories that we carry with us that are basically essentially the way in which we navigate the world through the ego, right? I'm going to answer the question that is the title of today. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, music. Thank you. And so here, okay? And that is, if you agree that there's a shadow side, and to each their own, right? Then you have to agree that there's some sort of embodiment of this. And so again, to go back to what I just said, right? Satan, which means the opposer. If you take it even drill down even deeper, it just means, somebody who is like your accuser, right? But it's psychological. So it's a psychological accuser. It's like when it's like self-sabotaging. It's really the ultimate embodiment, the poetic embodiment of your own self-sabotage. That is what the word devil and Satan, actually it's ha-satan, right, in Hebrew. And if you drill down, it means accuser. And yes, it does mean in legal sense, because somebody might even bring that up, right? Yeah, actually, I have quite a bit. Half my family is from there. So basically, when we're coming to this idea of doubt, when we're coming to this idea of fear, when we're coming to this idea of depression and anxiety, okay, we have to understand that why we vilified it is because we have this belief that we have a shadow side. We have this belief that we have a dark side. We have this belief that Satan exists. Whether that's a metaphor or not, we still believe that there's some form of devil, right? And there's part of what I do in terms of what I agree with Neville is that there are doubts, there are limiting beliefs. Do I believe it is the embodiment and that we embody it? No. This is where I differ with Neville, but I'll explain why. So there is a concept from Hebrew thought, from Jewish thought, which, by the way, informed all of our understanding of the original concepts behind the Bible and the Torah and the Tanakh and the Gemara and the Gematria and all these kind of Tanya and all of these other Jewish documents, right, that a lot of people use even today to understand the original intention of the rabbis and the authors, and there's the sect of Judaism, which today is not like what Neville and how he was trained through Abdullah, right? About looking at, he took the Kabbalah and added a load more mysticism, which came from Abdullah's exposure to like Ethiopianism and so on and so forth, which was a form of mystical Christianity, right? And so when you're dealing with this idea, right? When you're dealing, can I manifest from any emotion, or what do I do with the dark side? One, I don't believe in the dark side, but in a one sense, right? I'm going to actually use Neville's own work to actually show why it doesn't exist. But to do that, we have to go to Judaism and to Hebrew language. Okay. And I'm going to bring in Alan Watts. I don't know if you've ever heard of Alan Watts. Love the guy. And so he breaks down this concept from the ancient Hebrew language, right? Which is called the Yetzer Hara, okay? Now, that's where most people say, ooh, look at the Bible talks about it, and maybe it's the devil, maybe it's not the devil, but there's this evil inclination, and so on and so forth, right? That's a great question, so I'm gonna get to that as well. And so the Yetzer Hara, it's very, very interesting, because when you take it down to its first level of translation, you can kind of argue that it might be a body of beliefs, or that it might be the shadow side, right? And that's where most people get it if they're using a lot of Judaism in their understanding, or even mysticism, right? In their understanding of what it means to have a shadow side. Now, the cool thing is Alan Watts, I know he's dead, but I'm saying it as if he's alive. But there's a YouTube where he's talking and he's breaking down the Yetzer Hara, right? And he is like, listen, there's an utter rascality to humans, right? And I don't agree with that either, right? And I think because he's drilling down, but he's not drilling down far enough, okay? And so then you take it further, and I remember doing some study on this, and there was a great website on it, and the author, who was a scholar, a Hebrew scholar, had argued that it really wasn't anything wrong with humanity. Like, meaning, because a lot of the idea with Satan and the devil, especially if you believe in any of it, or even if you believe in the shadow side, right, that there's something wrong with humanity, and there isn't. I will never agree to that, right? And maybe because I'm just a militant optimist, I have no idea. But like, basically, you get the idea that there's something wrong with humans, and human behavior and human choice, and we're always skewed. And again, don't worry, I'm going to use Neville right now to actually prove why this is wrong. So it's ironically, because ironically I do this because I'm not trying to disprove him overall. I'm just trying to show that there's a better concept of understanding what we call like being selfish, or what we call the ego, what we call, the dark side, what we call, well, that's Star Wars, but like what we call the shadow side, what we call the devil, whatever it is that you want to call, doesn't matter what religion you believe in, whatever, right? If you just want to call it evil, right? Oh my gosh, humans are evil. I don't believe that, right? So, but this will answer your question, right? Music is that essentially when you understand the Yetzer Hara, right? And again, okay. Oh, Camille, welcome, by the way. And yes, I will definitely get you that link. I know for some reason, by the way, Discord loves to just make those things defunct after, I think, a week or two. So please stay on. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. That was not an earthquake. But yes, I will. So I will definitely get that to you, Camille. If you want, if you can, there's an email also on my bio there. So email me just so as a quick reminder and say, hey, I was the one who was asking for the link. Sorry, guys. We're having some technical difficulties today. Okay, so, all right. So, yeah, so I will send that. So back to this, and don't worry, one day I will actually probably edit these all down so they look a little bit more professional. But right now I'm just trying to be relatable and also get some content out to you guys. So, okay, so back to this, right? So the Yetzer Hara, if you want to look it up yourself, it's Yetzerhara, the Yetzer Hara. So one Hebrew scholar had a great definition, and right, this is going to go back to Musik's idea, okay, of questioning, like, well, where do bad things happen and stuff. And so the Yetzer Hara is better understood, according to this Hebrew scholar, as like how Sigmund Freud, as in the father of psychoanalysis, right? And as a feminist, I also believe that women, by the way, also contributed to, psychology as well, like Sabina Spielrein and all these other notables. But you end up having the Yetzer Hara, which is, you can say it's an evil inclination, which means we're inclined to do evil. I don't agree with that. But this particular Hebrew scholar said, well, you really have to understand this as more of like the unconscious, which ding, 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 that's closer, not exactly, but it's pretty damn close to Neville's idea of the subconscious, right? And Joseph Murphy's approach to the subconscious, right? And so that's what the Yetzer Hara is, right? You have this recorder, this mental recorder that's always on, and it's recording all of your thoughts, your beliefs, everything you hear, everything that you emotionally respond to, right? And that happens at a very young age, right? One day I'll probably just talk about the work of Jacques Lacan, just so you can understand this, right? And so when you're trying to understand the Yetzer Hara and try to answer what music is saying, right? Then you understand, oh, so you can actually argue that there isn't a shadow side. That maybe Jung, even though he was very hyper-focused about and archetypes, so was Neville. And that's why, and they both mention each other, like I've shared before, right, in their own respective works. In the Red Book and the Black Book in Jung. And then there is, I think, a couple lectures where Neville actually mentions Jung as well. And also even the way in which Neville uses the archetypes, as in, oh, the disciples never existed, they stood for this, they stood for that, they stood for this. That's archetypal, right? And so that just means there are these people that embody certain characteristics, right? And so, like in, fairy tales, right? You have the witch, and have you ever noticed how women are always vilified in most of those Grimm's fairy tales? It's not right. But you basically have like the good witch and the bad witch, and you have like the good voice and the bad voice, and you have all these archetypes. This is exactly what's happening with this idea of evil and using the idea of Satan and the devil, right? And so, it's true though, right? And so, so you have this concept following us for thousands of years, okay? Through Western literature, non-Western literature, through folk religion, everything is showing, hey, there's something evil about humanity. Nah, that's actually borrowed from religious belief, right? And so, the biggest question that people have, and you see this, by the way, you can actually find this is really interesting, is the story of Cain and Abel, right? And again, they most likely didn't exist. And you can find the similar stories across most ancient cultures. I mean, ancient Asian culture, Middle Eastern culture, all of these kinds of ancient world cultures, early world cultures had this question. Well, then why do we do what we do? So again, you have Christianity who says we're all evil, right? You have Judaism that says we have an evil inclination, right? You have a devil, all this kind of stuff. And similar to some pre-Buddhist religions and so on and so forth. And so the concept, though, is that if you take this Hebrew scholar's idea of the Yetzer Hara, right, is that we don't have an evil inclination, that we have a body of limiting beliefs, that we have a body of fears, that we have a body of behaviors. And so when you find people doing bad stuff or murderers or whatever it is, they've agreed to it. They've agreed to that story. So here's a very powerful way to understand how God answers prayer. I'm gonna have to do some shifting because my battery's low. But basically, you end up with this concept that people were taught, right? So the Apostle Paul says basically that every single thing in our life is kind of a product of culture, okay? What that means is when he says we're a jar of clay, right? That means we're getting stuff thrown into us, right? As a child, okay? That means we are having beliefs and ways of seeing the world and so on and so forth, right? And so the penal system exists because we believe people are evil, right? We don't believe in, and there's another part to this, right? I mean, you could even argue that the penal system exists because now it's turned into a business, so it needs prisoners because it needs money from the government, and so on and so forth. You can also talk about the other side of this, where you can actually, it's rehabilitative justice, and so you actually, which is more of where I stand, is you can actually rehabilitate people, right? But if you believe people are fundamentally evil or fundamentally selfish or fundamentally whatever it is, fill in the blank, then you're going to have the belief that people should go to prison, right? And so it becomes this ethical thing where we're like, oh, okay, well, so this is what Neville's saying. You get what you believe. So you believe the world's a dangerous place, so you're going to create a prison to actually prove it. So we think the prison exists to prove that we're right, and it's actually our belief that exists to prove that we're right or wrong, right? Whatever we accept to be true. And so the reason why I started out with this, because the question that I started out with in terms of the title is, can we ever use certain emotions, right? Can we use every emotion? Well, Neville talks about in one of his lectures, which I had mentioned before, about a guy who uses annoyance. Like I don't do that, but I get how he could. So he was annoyed that there were painters at his house because he wanted to get his house painted. He didn't have money. Okay. And he got annoyed in his vision, in his imagination. He created a scene, and he could actually still see people as he was getting ready to take a shower outside of his bathroom window. And it really annoyed him. And so lo and behold, and he created another scene as well, which was an annoying one. And lo and behold, he manifests, like, I think it's like 20 grand or something like that. But it was really interesting because it was royalties. He was an actor, and it was royalties from a movie or a show that he was on that nobody else on that show had gotten, right? But he had used annoyance as a way to manifest. And, we're told in scripture as well by Paul, in your anger, do not sin. And Neville says, go ahead, get angry, blow up, he even says, right? So can you use anger? Yes, you can use anger. But here's the thing, and I want to break this down. It says, in your anger, do not sin. Now, what is sin? Sin is missing the mark, but according to Neville, and I agree with him, right? Missing the mark is giving up on your desire. That's really what it is. Giving up on being satisfied. Giving up on finding your joy. Whatever your desire represents. If your desire represents freedom, then you give up on freedom. If your desire represents feeling loved, then you give up on feeling loved, right? And so when it says in your anger, and by the way, if you're new to this, the Hebrew idea when they throw in the word in means within, okay? It's like they kind of like shorthanded it, right? And so anytime you read from the Old Testament to the New Testament, the word in, it's always in the imagination. It's saying in the imagination, okay? So when it says in your anger, go ahead. So the assumption is that you're pissed off, okay? So while you're getting pissed off, don't give up on your desire. While you're being happy, don't give up on your desire. And that's the irony, by the way. Some people, and this is what Neville kept saying, he's like, people will actually manifest stuff and then forget where it all originated, right? They'll get so excited. So I would even say in your excitement, do not sin. In your joy, do not sin. In your freedom, do not sin, right? So again, let me say this a different way because that's very old language. In your emotional experience, in your emotional conviction of something happening, whether it be good or bad, do not give up your desire. Don't give up. That's really, really what it is, right? And I wrote 2 Reddit articles that just came out yesterday, back to back, right? And we talked about one of Neville's quotes, and basically it's saying, have no hind claws. Let me explain what that means. So he was talking memory, right? So his childhood memory, okay, was this idea. Sorry about the background. So his childhood memory, okay, was catching crabs. And what he noticed is that these crabs had a hind claw, and this hind claw was there to protect them. This hind claw was there to catch their fall. This is going to be very different than what you're used to hearing, especially in manifestation circles. But this is what Neville is saying, okay? And I had fun with it, and I was like, hey, ChatGPT, tell me what this is saying. And so it opened with it had said, life is like living on the edge of a precipice. And it reminded me of one of my favorite life quotes. So I have a few life quotes. And one of this is, and this is talking about life, like live on the edge, because if you're not, you're taking up way too much room. And that is really what it's saying. Like then you're always hedging your bet. So that means if you're imagining and then you're like, no, yeah, but I'm imagining money, but then I need to go borrow some from my mom. Now, if that's an inspired action, that's different, right? If that's an inspired action, very different, okay? But if you are always hedging your bet. Now, if you don't understand what that means, if you're always putting in a safe net, like we're like, hey, we should save this for a rainy day. I'm not against saving because that's what rich, smart people, wealthy people do. But if you're doing it because a what if scenario, hey, what if the car flattens, or what if the blah, 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 and you're always saying what if, which by the way, what you're doing is you're planning for loss. And so Neville says, don't believe in loss. So does Joseph Murphy, right? Don't concede to loss. Is there anything wrong with saving money? No, I'm for it. I'm in investing. I mean, Neville says, be investing everything. Invest your senses, invest your memories, and invest your thoughts. Everything should be investing, right? So I'm not against any of that. But I hope you hear that the heartbeat of what's being said here is you should not do anything or choose actions that hedge your bet. Let me say it another way. Burn all your boats. If you're going to imagine that you're a billionaire, do not hedge your bet. If you're going to imagine that you're in love, don't keep going out and trying to find someone else to hold off until you get your SP. I see that way too much, right? Is there anything wrong with doing that? No. But are you doing it because you're hedging your bet? Because you're like, well, that may not work out, right? And so that's why Neville says in the quote, if you go check out my Reddit article, it's under OK Initiative, or I think you can find my name, but it's under the Neville Goddard Reddit, right? And so if you're constantly hedging your bet, that means you fear. Okay, that means you believe that this thing that we call 3D or the stage world is more real than your desire and more real than the imagination. Okay, so then that means you're constantly planning ahead. And again, I'm not against planning ahead. I'm an outdoor survivalist, all this kind of good stuff, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't plan for the worst. You plan for the best. So, and I've shared this before, but I love the actual word image, and we're going to come back to this about this idea of hedging your bet. But the Hebrew idea, right, for hope, and one day I'm going to break down faith, hope, and love. But hope is such a powerful word but I don't believe in hope manifesting, and that means I don't believe in the way in which we as Westerners, right, define hope. The Eastern, as in the esoteric, mystical authors of the Bible, defined it very differently. The word hope from the Hebrew is so beautiful, and it's really cool. And this is, by the way, if you're like trying to manifest tickets to like Disneyland, you can use this as an example. But like, you know, and I've shared this before, but the Hebrew writers wrote in pictures. They didn't write in words. We read words when we read the Bible. We read words when we read all of this mystical stuff. They wrote in pictures, meaning they intended for us to get a word picture when they're writing what they're writing. Okay, so when they use the word hope, they're writing pictorially, right? They want you to think of a picture. So the picture that I've read, according to some scholars, and this is going to help you better understand the idea of why it's so important to grasp onto this kind of hope, not the Western understanding or Christian understanding of hope, right? Which is, it's like a child who is so excited. And by the way, this is a great technique for you to manifest your desires. That is so excited. And I mean like off the wall, like full on, like had so much Red Bull, like candy, like you can't contain the excitement, kind of excitement, right? And it's this child is literally bouncing off of their couches, their chairs, looking out the window. When's dad coming home? When's dad coming home? Here's what they're not doing. Dad may not come home. By the way, stick the word dad with your desire, with your fulfilled desire. You want to be with somebody you love, stick that in there where I put dad and father or whatever, right? And so you want to be a billionaire, stick billionaire in there, whatever it is. So they're sitting there, they're active. It's kinetic, it's physical, and it's also, and I'm actually very different than a lot of people in the Neville world because I also adopt a little bit of the work of Florence Scovel Shinn. So what that means is that you have to have an action in this world as well that looks like you actually are embodying the excitement of expectation. This child, you, the inner child, is not questioning whether dad's coming home or not. Right? They are literally out of like insanity, almost excitement of like, I know dad's coming and I'm looking, not because I'm afraid it's not going to come, but because I know it's already here. Right? And so all you're waiting is for the actual thing to show up. Right? And so, that's what it is. That's what the Hebrew idea of hope is. It's this hyperactive child who is so adamantly convinced that their dad is coming home, nothing is getting in its way. They don't even care if they have to climb the refrigerator to see out the window. They don't care how long it's going to take. It's already on its way, right? That's what the Hebrew idea for hope is. That's what you are grasping on, right? So when you go and say, I have imagined this to happen, you then walk in that childlike state, right? You don't let anything deter you. Okay, you look out the window, you find ways to peer, you find ways to see. This is what loyalty and faith means. And I'm gonna come back to your question, Raheem. Sorry, I'm on a run. And so loyalty means you're looking for reasons why that's true already. So that's what faith means. What is faith? Faith is loyalty. What is loyalty? You're looking for reasons and excuses and optimistic interpretations and reasons why things are already the way that you want them to be. And you're looking for that in your world, no matter how big or small. Like one of my mentors told me, he said, when you start imagining, he goes, you should be able to see whether it's the smallest change ever, even if it's the smallest change within yourself, you should be able to see within 24 hours movement, right? And that's so true, but that takes training as well, right? So Raheem, we're talking about, can you use negative emotions? But not just negative emotions, all emotions to manifest. But right now I'm talking about hope, right? In the midst of this, because, but yes, you can use any negative emotion, but the emotion itself can't be from lack. You can't be angry because you don't have. Have you ever met somebody who is like passionate, but they're borderline look like they're angry? That's the difference, right? That's the difference between saying I'm angry, not because I know that this is not going to come. I'm angry because I feel there's a deep-seated passion within me that I know I deserve this. That's where the anger is. Do you hear the difference, though? Like, there's a massive difference between two different stories. One knows and is okay with the anger, right? And again, back to that lecture about the guy being annoyed and using annoyance, right? Because why? Well, he was annoyed that the painters were still painting his house. Why? Because he wanted somebody to paint his house, right? And so so that annoyance was proving to him his desire was already answered, right? Because they were already there. And he even got annoyed at one point. This is really, really, really cool example as well that he used as well in Neville's lecture, okay? And he actually ended up touching the wall in his imagination. And he was like, oh man, because the paint was still wet, right? Because he wanted his house painted, And see, I wouldn't get angry at your old self, right? Because what does Neville say about the dweller within? And that's what we start talking about at the beginning as well. Raheem, how I don't agree with Neville's concept of the dweller within, and why in which we have vilified some emotions over another, which I haven't got to yet, right? Why we turn some emotions into bad and some into good, which is a bad thing in and of itself. But I wouldn't get angry at your old self at all, Thermal. Like Neville says when he talks about the dweller within, which again is really from Carl Jung's work, which is the archetype of, the embodiment of evil and limiting thoughts, is you love. And that's what Neville says. He goes, no matter what, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, he's like, I'm going to use my whole life to love the limiting beliefs to oblivion, like to nothing. Right. And so because in his vision, he tried to do violence to it, which means he hated it. Right. And it just grew. So you want to get rid of them, but you get rid of them not by focusing on them. You get rid of them by overcoming them. Hence why it says, right, we overcome, right, which really means you tell a much more powerful story, right, of having rather than not having. Okay. Now, yeah, exactly. So listen, I heard a great like a podcast today with Jay Shetty. Yes, that one, the ex-monk, with the actor Orlando Bloom. And this is actually, it has to do with this. And then I'm going to answer the question again about can we use, our emotions, any of them. But also there's another step here that we need to deal with that I think is extremely important about that. And that's why I want to start out with with the beginning of this talk. But on this conversation, right, Orlando Bloom, who's with Katy Perry, right, talked about, because he's a Buddhist as well. And so he was talking about his own journey. Okay. And so he was saying how they use this particular technique from the Hoffman Institute. Okay. And what they would do is that him and Katie would sit down. Obviously, this, by the way, this was not physical. So when you hear like, oh, they were like, punching each other out, it's metaphorical. It's psychological. It's mental. But he was saying, right, that what they would do based on this new technique, and you should check it out. It is called the Hoffman Institute. It's here in the States. And they would sit down and they would say, listen, we're going to have this conversation, but we're not going to have it as our people now. We're going to have it as our children, right? Meaning we're going to deal with our limiting beliefs, right? And again, it may be better for you to do it with a therapist or do it with a pillow. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be, the other person has to be in agreement to be able to do this, because they have to bring their inner child out as well. And you bring your inner child out. And he goes, no matter how much we duke it out, no matter if one of us falls, and by the way, let me just say, he's not talking about physically, he's talking about emotionally, right? And he goes, the only rule here that we commit to is that we don't give up, that we get back up. Right. And so that's kind of the idea that Neville is talking about when he says, I'm going to do whatever it takes to love my limiting beliefs. Okay. That doesn't mean I fall in love with my doubt. It means, why do I doubt? Where's it coming from? What's the story saying? Why is it saying that? Who gave me that story? And why am I still agreeing with it? And all of these kinds of things are extremely important. Right. And so, that's, by the way, hopefully that answered your question, Raheem, right? And yes, guys, I'm a huge, as somebody who is a trained psychologist, right? And no, I'm not a therapist. That's very different. Okay. I'm a social psychologist. Okay. One of the things that you realize is that therapy, there's nothing wrong with therapy, as long as you're not doing it for a second cause, which means you're not looking to it as the power behind you, right, to heal you, right? It may be something that's inspired action, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've gone to it. I think God could use therapy. I think anybody could use therapy, right? And so I'm a big advocate of it. And so that's one way. Use friendship, like Raheem, like honestly, obviously I'm a coach, but Raheem, you and I've actually worked together. So, continuing that, anything along those lines where you have some sort of way to process them is going to be helpful. Right. And so, right. And that is very, very important. But one thing I do want to get out, and this is partially why I did this, because while I was listening, this dawned on me again. And we've talked about this before a little bit in the context of Abraham Hicks or Esther Hicks or law of attraction kind of people. And they look at emotions as hierarchical. Some are good, some are bad. That's awful, everybody. Like, that's really bad. Like, all emotions can be good. All emotions have the potential to be good. And that's what we're talking about today. So if you can, I would love to encourage you, and it may take you a few times to do this, right? And this may be my only really easy tip, but it is actually from NLP, and that's changing the way that you talk about your emotions. Okay. And in NLP, it's called modal operators, right? And so what that means is you're talking how your emotions are empowering, not disempowering. That even if you're depressed, that you have told yourself a story that you're depressed, and that there's a story behind that story, right? And maybe it's that you are, because depression tends to be about powerlessness as well, unless it's chronic, right? And that means you've told yourself a story where you're now the victim that can't get out, right? And so look at your emotions not as good, not as bad, right? Please remove both of those words, right? There isn't a such thing as being angry is bad. Why? Because check this out. Hey, X, if you continuously label some emotions bad and some emotions good, what do? We get what we believe. So then what are you going to do? You're going to what? Feel shameful. You're going to feel regretful. What does Neville say not to do? Do not spend a second in regret, okay? So do not spend a second in regret. This is so key. Please get this, okay? So even then, just taking do not spend a moment in regret, and you can add shame to that as well. His way of believing about what we manifest is very different from the law of attraction, because law of attraction, like I just said, sees emotions as hierarchical. Some are good, some are bad. There's no such thing. All you're doing then is you're labeling them, what you're going to experience them as. Then you're going to bring the very thing that Neville says, do not. Why? Why would he say not to regret? Because you're telling the old story, right? Because when you regret, you're living the old story, right? And then it's like the fuel to the car that is your self-concept that you don't want to be having anymore, right? And so you're like, hey, let's go. Let's just keep running with regret, right? And this actually brings me to the third point, okay? And so please, that's my only tip for today. Work on removing good and bad, okay? But then two, when we're kind of walking through our emotional journey, because this is really an emotional journey. Every single thing in this world is emotional, right? So there's a verse in Isaiah that says that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, okay? Another way of saying that is imagination is the trademark. You know how like you'll go in and see, like, maybe you'll buy a product, and then like, and I'm thinking of toy products because I have a baby, but I mean, like, they'll have like a little trademark, and it'll be like either their brand, or it'll be like a trademark with an R, or a trademark with a T, or a trademark with a C, whatever it is, it's saying this is owned by that, okay? And so when you're doing this, when you are realizing that the world is emotional, it's like saying everything in the world has a trademark from imagination, right? That means everything has an emotional start, an emotional beginning, okay? War, probably misused anger, okay? Now, did you hear me? I didn't say bad, I said misused. Because emotions are energy, right? And you're just misusing that energy, okay? And it's also why Paul says we should pray for our leaders, right? And what does that mean? Assume the best of them, assume the best for them, on behalf of them, right? Because we live in a world that just is driven by emotion. And yes, some people are gonna say, yeah, but what about logic? Nope. And I'll show you a crap load of research, neuroscience research, that shows what we call logic is fueled by emotion, right? And so everything in this world is emotional, energy in motion, okay? And so yes. So let's see, being in tune. Have you heard of a term, being in tune, by Alan? Well, actually, it's funny that you said that, Thermal, because I talked about Alan Watts at the beginning, when I'm basically giving you the origin of why we vilify some emotions over others, right? Why do we say some are bad and some are others? Because we have this old, archaic, boring idea that we have a shadow side. Yes, I disagree with Neville on this. I disagree with Jung on this, who is kind of the father of the shadow side, right? But if you go back to the beginning, I talk about it, and why it doesn't work, and why Neville actually really kind of disagrees with himself. And so the other part that I want to talk about, it leads us to this part. And I'm probably going to do a separate video on this, so check that out, where I'm going to talk a little bit more deeper about it. But there is no such thing as failure, right? There's no such thing as loss, y'all. Like, there is no such thing as, what else is there? Confusion, right? So listen, wait, because people are going to want to fight me on this, and I get that. But let me explain, and this is from Neville's work as well. If there's no such thing as loss, and this is a very surface level understanding, because I want it to be basic, there's actually way more to this. And you could join my coaching program to find out more about it. Or join the free Discord and we can talk about it. And all those links are in my bio. Yes, I do have packages. Please consider, would love to have you as a client. So again, back to this. And so what we're dealing with is that when Neville says there's no regret, there's meaning don't spend a moment in regret. So you kind of fundamentally have to accept that there is no regret, right? And then you end up having, that this might even help answer that question, Raheem, as well. But when you have regret, and Neville says don't have regret, you kind of have to disagree that regret, agree that regret doesn't exist. Because if you agree that regret exists, then you're going to have opportunities to regret, right? But then if you also agree that failure exists, then you're going to agree to failure. So why do I say this? Well, this is actually from Neville and also the Bible, okay? Because there's two major parables, and I've shared this before, but there's the parable of the lost son, the prodigal son, right? We have a whole law based on it. And then Then we also have the parable of the 99 sheep. Okay, these are all about how the imagination, in some way, shape, or form, is there either waiting or is going out and rescuing your lost desire. There's no such thing as loss. Okay, so but what do we say failure is? Oh, I failed. Yeah, but that means you lost that opportunity. There's no such thing as loss. So let me give you an easy way to reframe this, okay? There's only learning. Now, that also actually teams up really well with the idea of test. The word test in Hebrew is not test, right? That's a load of Christian theologians running with a lot of Western baggage and trying to say that's what the word test means. Well, the word test, the word struggle, the word battle, the word pain, all of these are fundamentally the same word in Scripture. And the word is skill. Okay, skill is not the same as test. Okay, but we hear the word test and we think, oh, well, if I have a test, I can lose, I can fail, right? No, that is a very 3D mentality towards it. When you and Neville says in his picture image lecture that basically life is like, or well, using the law is like playing a violin or tuning a piano, right? And so what do? When you're learning the law, when you're learning the imagination, when you're learning how to use things, you never fail. You're just learning. And that is exactly what you want to start doing. So when you look at something and something happens and not in the way that you want, call it a learning experience because you're skilling up, you're leveling up. But there's actually more to this because I actually believe when Neville talks about revision, there's no such thing as loss. That means you can revise the situation to the point where it actually shows up in your life as you wanted it. Yeah, there may have been a time gap, but at the same time, there is no loss. So yes, fundamentally, if there's something happens and you don't care about it, meaning you don't care about revising it, then just say it was learning. Never concede, never agree to loss. Never. Right? Because again, Joseph Murphy even says, when you do that, you open up the window and the door to the possibility of more loss. So you never concede to it. Okay? And so that means you never concede to failure. And again, I know you've heard the quote, and I'm going to butcher it right now, but Thomas Edison, right? I didn't learn 2,000 ways to fail. I just learned 2,000 ways not to do something, right? And that's the same concept. Okay, so, back at the beginning when I said, oh, there is no devil, there is no dark side, there is no shadow side. And then I broke down the Yetzer Hara, which is the Hebrew mystical concept of having limiting beliefs, really, from the Freudian unconscious, right? Then you end up, okay, well, I have limiting beliefs of loss. Okay, well, then deal with that because you don't want to actually agree to that, right? You want to revise those childhood memories. You want to begin telling a different story, okay? And so, right? Yeah, so let's come back to the basic idea of if you think and live by your feelings, becoming emotionally about something of the wish fulfilled. Yeah, exactly, right? What do I think of the Silva method? It's fine. I've used it. Nothing came of it. Now, and I can probably tell you why. I know other people have used it and it worked great. So am I against people using it? No. You will find people who are hardcore Neville and are like, that's it. No, you shouldn't be messing with it. You use whatever it is that works for you, right? And so, the reason why I know it doesn't work in one sense, and I'm not saying it doesn't work for anybody else, I'm just saying my own experience, is because you're also having a scene, there's 3 scenes, and one of the scenes is the middle. And Neville says, don't focus on the middle. Don't focus on the how. Live in the end, right? And so, then that trips up a lot of people because they're like, wait a minute, it didn't happen that way. Or why is not? So then you're looking for the middle rather than looking for the end, right? And so, but if it works for you, it works for you. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, back to this idea of like, do not concede to loss, do not concede to failure, start using different words. Just say it's a learning opportunity, right? Because again, are you going to tell a 5-year-old girl who's learning how to play the violin, you suck? Oh my gosh, you're so stupid. You failed. No, you're not, right? And I know those teachers exist, but what I'm trying to get at by using this extreme example is to say, oh, you're just learning, right? You're not going to tell a kid every single time it falls off the bicycle, you're so stupid. And I know some parents who do that. But what I'm saying is that you cannot, right, agree to that tactic. One, you're actually then feeding your self-sabotage. Because then you're like, oh, well, now I have excuse for why this isn't working, right? And you don't want any excuses. Remember what I just said in the middle of this? No hind claws. There's no plan Bs. You have to go all in. And so the more that you agree to failure, the more you have an excuse to fail more, right? And so you have to just look at everything that's coming your way as either the old story or the process unfolding to get you to where you want to be. Again, like when Neville was fired by JCPenney, he's like, that needed to happen because I wouldn't have been here, meaning what he was doing preaching, right? And so you have to look at it that way, right? But I still believe that you can use revision to actually get anything back, right? And so I don't believe that there is loss, right? And so, and the other side to this is the neuroscience. The more that you actually use language of like, oh my gosh, I failed, and you keep using that, this will happen naturally, okay? That is, you will start identifying as the failure, right? So this is yet another reason. So then you're saying you are the embodiment of loss, okay? And you don't want to do that because then you just start, I don't like the word magnet, but magnetizing experiences of loss, right? And so, yeah, you can't have plan Bs. You have to burn all your boats. If you're going all in, that means doubt. That means things that look like setbacks can't be setbacks. Like you have to give them different language. You have to give them a different story. You have to give them something that has no power over you, right? Time, especially. That's a big one for people, okay? Now, Neville says we don't get to know time, but most of the people that I've encountered, even in my own experiences as well, is that you can usually manifest most things within 3 days to 2 weeks, right? And, and again, that's not a timeline to be like, why am I not doing that? No. It takes time. Everybody's journey is different. And some people say, hey, like somebody wrote yesterday on Reddit that it took them 10 years to actually manifest their SP back. By then they weren't interested, right? But most of this is down to us accepting failure, right? And so because we accept limiting beliefs, which is a form of failure, right? And so it is working on ourselves. It is doing the deep work of going to therapy, if that's what you so feel called to do, to using your friendship as therapy, to, downloading some books buying some books from Amazon on CBT, whatever it is, right? Or going with coaches or whatever it is that you want to do, going out and hiking. Whatever makes you come alive is the thing that you need to chase after in terms of your techniques, right? Is it fair to make it simple by saying bulletproof plan has no plan B? Yeah, if that's the language that helps you, yes. You want to use a language that is like basic. And by the way, if you want to understand what Neville means when he says you want to use his technique of brazen impudence, that's what he's saying. There's no plan B. There's none. There never is, never will be, right? So that means you are the person who has the SP. You are the person who has the new car. You are the person who can pay your bills. You are the person who has a lavish income. You are the person. There's no other option. None, right? And so, yeah, okay. So appearance change, like somebody asked me this the other day about like, how can I manifest height? Well, this is a very practical tip for height. And, but maybe this will also give you something as well, Camille, is, if like this person want to be taller. So I said, look down at people, like not down at them, like, oh, you're stupid. But like physically looking down at them in your imagination, right? And just hugging them, feeling it like it's natural. And so again, when you're doing physical appearances, for some people it's hard because you're looking right at it, right? But the main thing is, and I've heard some awesome stories about people doing it. So, is persistence. Is you've got to keep going with the emotions, but you've got to watch your inner conversations are going to be huge, right? So yes, imagine. And no matter how long it takes, just keep imagining, right? So, and give yourself one action after the fact that you've already had that change. It's always got to be after. You're already that person, right? So if it's like, let's say you have acne and you're like, I want to clear the acne. So imagine yourself walking into the bathroom and seeing your reflection and just feeling relief, right? Or feeling like excitement because you're like, man, I got to try all these new like makeups or whatever it is. Same with allergies, right? Or anything. Imagine you are doing the thing that might actually be what you would do after the fact, right? It's never the day after, by the way. It's like weeks after, because you are that person. You're embodying the new person, right? And so, yeah, so hopefully that's helpful, but choose something that makes sense to you, right? So I could throw out like ideas, but this has to be something that you own because it makes sense to you, right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's it's a violent analogy, but that's basically what it is, X. Yeah. I mean, like, I tend to be more of an optimist, so I'm looking at different ways of looking at this. Like, again, I just call it skill. This is just skill building, right? Life is skill building, but skill building what you as a manifester, and what is manifesting do according to Neville? It's waking you up to what? To your own divinity. So yes, you want to manifest every day, because the more you do that, according to him, you're waking up, right? And you're waking up to your own power, to the fact that you are God. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all of these changes are good, right? All of these changes are awesome. And this is where you can also influence your bridge of incidence, which I shared before. You may not be able to know how, but the what you can definitely shape, because the what is what you believe about life, right? And this is something that Raheem and I talked about when we were coaching together, right? Was like, this idea of accepting your macro or your micro beliefs, which I have a video on, right? And so, yeah. And I mean, again, if you guys are looking for coaching, you're looking for support, you're looking for science-backed coaching, neuroscience-backed coaching, that's what I do, right? That's where all my training is, in psychology and neuroscience and behavioral science. And, how to build a routine, that's where I specialize in, right? Because behavioral science is all about studying human habits. But, yeah, so I mean, like, and most Red Hood, what I've read in terms of, let's see. So most people are in their 20s, right? 20s and 30s, that I've read, Red Hood. So, but I also wouldn't put age on it, right? I mean, like, if you want to be ageless, be like, oh, tell yourself that you have been. Okay. Sorry. The stream froze. Sorry about that. Thanks everybody for holding on. So yeah, so the stream froze. Yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, so again, yes, back. Sorry about that. So again, let me see. What is this? Quick share. I'm making that change in my life. First changes in my life. Being grateful for every little success. Yes. So, that's like the story, right? That's the story, Thermal, of, and Neville talks about this, of the parable of the 10 people who came back and thanked Jesus, right? And I mean, sorry, no, only one came back. And, in the Psalms, it says, we will enter his courts with thanksgiving in our hearts, right? Enter his courts with praise, and his obviously being the imagination, right? Oh, thank you. Hi, Rebecca. Welcome. And so but again, it's a deep gratefulness. You don't need to be grateful to manifest anything. That's a lie, by the way. So, a lot of people think, oh, I need to really muster up. No. Do it because it means something to you, right? Do it because neuroscience says you can't be grateful and angry at the same time, right? So like, do it because you care about it, right? So for me, I love feeling grateful, and for me, gratefulness gives me a much wider perspective rather than, oh, I just feel grateful because I'm trying to get something out of it, right? It's very transactional. But yeah, that's super cool. Yes, I believe you can change where you were born, right? You can change your birth certificate. You can change the name on your birth certificate. You can change, you can change the gender on your birth certificate. You can change, but if you're saying, can you physically change where you were born? Try it. Like that's, I mean, Neville says to test it, right? And so, can you change it? Yes. What'll probably happen is you'll probably start telling somebody in an imaginary scene, hey, I remember when I grew up here, right? Or, hey, I remember when, and now all your memories are now sifted through this new memory, right? So any memory that you did have is now in this new geographic region of the world where you wanted to be, right? And then what'll happen is maybe even people that knew you will start saying, wait, like they're going to start feeling disoriented, right? And so like, meaning they're going to be like, oh, yeah, but weren't you born over there, not here? Right. And so people are going to start matching up. How long will that take? I don't know. But I mean, like, basically choose scenes where people are mirroring back to you the fact that you weren't born where you were originally born. But then feel relief. Remember, and you and I've talked about this in one of our sessions, Raheem, is you, like, if you've never felt relief about something, you have to train yourself to feel relief. Like, and this is what Neville doesn't say, right? Is, you know what I mean? That you have to train yourself to feel the emotion that you don't know how to feel, or that you wouldn't know how to feel because you've never had the experience, right? And so again, it's super important that everybody recognize that Neville didn't say that, but the assumption is there that when he says things will be natural, that's the timeline, right? That's when he says there's a mental 6 days when he's using the Bible, right? The 6 days and the 7th day of rest. He isn't telling you how long that is. He's just saying it's a psychological metaphor, right? And so again, right? And so, we have, but the problem is some people actually can't feel it in that moment, right? So yes, we've all felt relief, but you actually have to train yourself. In fact, I've tested it myself and I've been able to manifest it. So you choose an emotion and you're like, okay, I want to feel this. We have to practice that emotion, right? And so, and I mean, that's what Joe Dispenza says, right? With the neuroscience and all this kind of stuff. You're constantly practicing the new emotion, right? And if you can't recall any of those memories of relief, then you have to practice and check out my other ones. And I will do. Somebody asked me like recently, like, can I do like a PDF, like an ebook of all my techniques? And I will work on that. It's going to take me a minute because there's a lot on all these videos. But go check out the NLP ones because that's how you anchor the new emotion. Right? I think it's like 3 NLP techniques or something like that. So that's how you anchor the actual new emotion. Okay. So you guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for dealing with all of the tech hiccups. It only gets better from here. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being supportive. If you're looking for coaching, I have my email in the bio. I have the Discord in the bio. I think Camille was asking for the link for the Discord. I'll make sure you get that. Make sure stay tuned for more. I will be recording more videos, and so watch out for those. So thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making this lively. So hope you all manifest amazing things today, and I will see you tomorrow. All right. Adios. Bye.